Hello and welcome to today's webinar, 10 Hidden Harmony Features You Can't Live Without. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. If we don't answer your questions during the webinar, someone will follow up with you after. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available to you within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Poole. Richard is the Chief Technology Officer of EMEA for Harmony, working directly with Harmony field teams and partners. Bringing with him 15 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize significant benefits in productivity enabled by collaborative platforms. Richard earned his Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you, Susan. So the purpose of today's session really is to highlight a few areas that Harmony can really help you as end users, where you may have already experienced Harmony, either the free edition or the enterprise edition to some degree, and maybe you're using it to kind of drag and drop emails from your Outlook into SharePoint. Harmony is also available across mobile devices and in the Outlook web app interface as well. But today's session, we're really going to focus on the Outlook integration and a number of areas where there's a lot of kind of hidden features and capabilities of Harmony that really help you as a user to collaborate better and work very, very effectively with your SharePoint content. So what we're going to do is going to go through each of these kind of areas, demonstrate them to you, and just ask a question whether it's something that you're aware of or something that's new to you. So the first area, as I mentioned, you may have experienced Harmony from the point of view of dragging and dropping emails from your Outlook into SharePoint. So that's quite kind of straightforward, and most people are aware of that. But also there are another few ways of capturing content as well. So for example, you can right-click on an attachment and say Save to SharePoint. You can use the ribbon controls at the top of your Outlook to save both the messages and the attachments. And you can also drag and drop content from Windows Explorer directly into the sidebar as well. So let's take a look at how that works in practice. So let's just navigate to a SharePoint library that we want to use for the purposes of this demonstration. And as we've seen before, we can easily drag and drop emails from my Outlook into the sidebar to upload them into SharePoint. But also, as I mentioned, if I want to take some attachments, I can also right-click on those. Choose the location. Harmony picks up the location that we've already browsed to. I've also got access to any of my favorite locations and the ability to browse through my site structure. But also, I can choose to replace the attachment with a link to the document in SharePoint as well. So very easily, I can upload the content and replace the attachment within my own email system. Likewise, if I've got another email here, I can use the ribbon controls at the top of the sidebar to actually save the message in the same way, or save the attachments. If there's multiple attachments there, I can choose which ones I want to put into SharePoint as well. Also, if I've got some content on a shared folder somewhere or on a local machine, I can navigate to documents using Windows Explorer and drag and drop those to upload those into SharePoint as well. Very, very easily, check them in, make them available to other users. And let's move on to the next item. So how can you be informed of new updates on content that you're interested in being notified about? Harmony has a favorites mechanism that you can mark any library or any view or any filtered view in a SharePoint library as a favorite location. Harmony can also suggest favorite locations if you browse to a library or a view multiple times. When you add that favorite, you can also choose to follow that location for activity so that you're then notified whenever any documents or items are updated or added, and you'll be notified about those in the Harmony update stream, which you can then further filter based on entering some text at the top, and everything there is contextual. So if you select an item, it will take you directly to that item. So let's have a look at that in our environment. So taking a look at where we were working before, we can see that I can always mark a view or a library as a favorite and give it a meaningful name. So let's say this is my project that I'm working on, and I want to follow it for activity. So not only can I get to that favorite from all of my Harmony interfaces, both on the desktop and on Harmony Mobile as well, but also I'm following that for activity. So if I take a look at my update stream, you'll see that I've got a number of different updates coming from some of the favorite locations that I'm following. And I can turn on and turn off the type of information that I want to see. And I can also filter that down. So for example, if I just want to see updates to do with value propositions, I can see that there's one new update here from one of my colleagues, Dave, and I can simply select that item, and Harmony will take me directly to that document in the relevant location and give me access to that document so I can carry out whatever operation I need. For example, I can right-click and check in, check out, or preview the document, as you may be aware of. So once you've found some content, maybe if you just followed an update that you've seen, it's very common that you actually want to share that document with somebody. Maybe you need to send it to somebody. So you may be aware that you can drag and drop documents into emails to create nicely formatted links that you can use in the context of your sentences and the body of your email. But also, there's another couple of ways to share content as well. For example, I can send the document as an attachment just by holding down the Alt key while I drag and drop, and that will attach the document instead. But also, from OneDrive and from SharePoint 2016 and Office 365 team sites, I can also choose to share items directly from the document itself. By clicking the Share button there, I can then grant access to somebody so that they can either view or edit that document. And let's see how that works in practice. So let's go back to our scenario here, where that document has been updated by one of my colleagues, and let's see how I can share that. So for example, if I compose a new email, you'll see that Harmony, because it's a sidebar, is also available within my email messages and even my calendar entries and things as well. So in this instance, I could simply drag and drop the document into the email to create a link to the document in SharePoint. Or if I need to send it as an attachment, I can do that just by holding down the Alt key on my keyboard while I drag and drop, and the document will then be attached to that email so I can send it out to the relevant person. Maybe I need to send it to an external party as a deliverable item. But also, as I mentioned, I can right-click on there and choose to share the item. So let's say I want to share this with one of my colleagues, Harmon Young, and I can then choose what permissions I actually give to that user. So maybe I want Harmon to be able to edit this document, and I can share it. At any point in time, I can also see who that document is shared with. So we can see I've actually shared it with a number of users, and Harmon is one of those people. Following on from that scenario where you've shared some content with somebody, maybe you've sent it to an external party as an attachment, it's very common that that person's going to make some changes to that document and actually send it back to you, typically again as an attachment if it's an external party. And the challenge there is getting that document back into SharePoint as a new version where the file name has been changed. Because most people, they'll save it locally, change the file name, make their comments and send it back so that you, as the recipient, know it's a different document or a different version. But again, getting that into SharePoint can be challenging because the file name's different. If you upload it into SharePoint, it will be considered a new document. So what Harmony allows you to do is actually drag and drop that received item on top of an existing document. If you wait for a few seconds, you'll see that you can choose to add that as a new version to that existing document, and it will rename it back to the original. So again, let's take a look at that. So in this scenario, we've received an update to a particular document, and also actually working in that other area, integration proposal. So again, tying together the fact that I can use my favorites to navigate directly back to where we were working before. Now, if I drag and drop that over the existing proposal, as I say, wait for a few seconds, I then have the ability to add that as a new version. And if I take a look at the version history, we'll see that I just added that as a new version 18 to this document a few moments ago. So all the traceability is maintained, and the user hasn't really had to do anything manually. So one of the other things around Harmony is not only capturing content and sharing it, but also working on that content in SharePoint directly from within your Outlook interface. Harmony really does change the way people use SharePoint, and a lot of people find it a very intuitive way to work with SharePoint items and SharePoint documents for their day-to-day tasks. So Harmony supports all the different ways that you could be managing your content, whether that's folders, document sets, and views. So we can see here that in this particular library, I've got a number of different views configured. Harmony will pick up the default view for that library, but you also have access to any public or private views that are defined in that library that you have access to. So it means that you can start to create views in SharePoint that are being grouped and being filtered and displaying different properties and things, so that users can have different views on the same content just by selecting a different view from the drop-down list there. Harmony allows me to also further utilize those views by filtering them. So I have access in a number of different ways to filter the content, both the taxonomy service using tags and terms to apply a filter, but also we can filter by individual columns as well. So for example, if I right-click on the top of a column there, you can see that I can choose to filter by that column, and then I can choose the values that I want to filter by. So very similar to the way you might be used to filtering columns in Excel, for example, and then applying that filter, and you'll see that I've got just a focused set of information that I'm interested in. So let's take a look at that. Again, some areas that you may not be aware of. You can use the breadcrumbs at the top of the sidebar to move between different locations as well. So if I select my site collection there and drill down into a particular library that we want to use for this example, you'll see here it's picked up the default view for this library, and I can choose any other views that I actually want in that area. I can then, as we saw before, apply filters either by selecting the filter button there for tags and terms, or I can actually select any of the columns there to filter by. So let's say I'm just interested in documents that have been modified by June and Carl. And then you'll see that that is filtering that grouped view. So now I've got a focused view on the information that I'm interested in. And something else that's very powerful with Harmony is the ability to actually work not just on individual items, but also multiple items. So we've kind of seen some examples of like capturing content and filtering and sending information to people. But also, I have the ability to update metadata, for example, and being able to do that on multiple items across different content types and things is very powerful to be able to do that in an intuitive way within Harmony. So I can select multiple items, right-click on any of them, and then edit the properties. You'll see here that I've got visibility of the items that I've selected while I'm editing that, and I can edit the properties on all of those items. When I click Save, it will check in all of them and save all my changes, prompt me to add a version comment if that's configured in my SharePoint library, and check all those items back in, make them available to other users, and organize my content effectively. In this case, it's actually some properties that are driving this view. So again, let's take a look at an example of that. So again, let's use those breadcrumbs to navigate to the library that we want to use for this example. And you can see here that the default view for this library is being grouped by a particular property. And if I select a number of items, let's say all of these items here, I can then right-click, bring up the properties for all of them. You'll see that there's one required property, which is highlighted with a red dot next to it. I can also apply a filter on the properties editor just to show the required properties or all of the editable ones. So in this case, I want to set them all to be secret, which is the property that's actually driving the grouped view in this particular library. And I want to update some of the properties as well. So let's say Melissa, who I'm working with on this project, is the project owner. Save those changes. As I say, it's now checking out all of those items, all of those 7 documents, making those changes for me, and just prompting me to check them in. So let's say that these have now been reclassified. And basically, in one click, it's doing quite a number of operations for me on multiple items. And that could be like a large number of items that I'm actually performing that on. So it's very, very intuitive, very easy to organize and categorize your content directly from the sidebar in a very intuitive way. And I think a lot of our business users are taking advantage of that. So we've obviously been focused on documents and emails so far, and that's probably what you've experienced yourselves. But we also do support other list types, things like announcements, task lists, custom lists, links and things, and contacts. And they work in a very intuitive way as well. So we're also supporting the views and the columns and all the metadata associated to those items. And I can also view and edit all the properties as well within the properties editor. So for example, if we take a task here, I can update the status, I can update the priority, I can assign the task to a different user. And I can even attach documents to list items as well. I can also follow those, so I can make a list or a view in a list a favorite like I could in a library, and follow that for activity. So for example, if I make my task list, my view in a task list as a favorite, then I'll be notified in my update stream when a new task is actually assigned to me. So let's take a look at that. I think tasks is quite a nice example here. So if I click into my task list here, you'll see all the tasks that are assigned to particular individuals. This is, again, the default view that's defined for this library, for this list. But also, I've got some other views there available to me. Again, anything that's configured in your SharePoint lists will be available to use from Harmony. So let's take one of those items and edit it directly within the sidebar here. So for example, I can update the priority. Let's say this is high. I need to update the status to say it's in progress, and I want to assign it to a different user. So in this instance, I'm actually going to assign it to myself. Yes, I want to change. Okay. Then I can save that. I can also save any attachments. So for example here, if we've received a document that I want to attach to this particular list item, I can just drag and drop it. You'll see that it's added as an attachment, and if I open up the properties for that task, I've got access to that particular attachment and document, and I can open it directly from there. Now if I choose one of my other views, like for example my tasks, you'll see that there's just that one task that was assigned to me. Again, I can add it as a favorite to say that this is my tasks. And whenever somebody else maybe updates that or assigns something to me, then I'll be notified about that in the update stream. Now, something else that Harmony is really great at is connecting to multiple environments. It may be that you've got some content on-premise and you've got some content online, but also, so you can see that there's a view that we call all sites. The sites I've connected to in Harmony, they may have been sites that I've added manually just by copying and pasting the URL into the top of the sidebar, or they may have been provisioned to me in a number of different ways. So for example, the social server here has been provisioned to me via a registry setting. The other sites there, construction, finance, etc., have actually been pushed to me from SharePoint using publish links. But also, it's picking up any sites that I'm following. So if I browse to a site in SharePoint and say, follow this site, it'll automatically appear in my Harmony sidebar. You'll also be able to see your OneDrive and access and work on the content that you have in your OneDrive. And also, if you're using Office 365, we support the groups that you're a member of automatically as well. So let's just illustrate that in our environment here. So let's take a look at my All Sites view. So as I said before, this social server here is being provisioned to me by the registry. These other ones are being provisioned from SharePoint using publish links. But also, I've got my favorites or sites I'm following. I've got access to my favorites from there as well. So anything that I mark as a favorite in Harmony. My OneDrive and my groups. And just to show you where that is actually enabled, you can see here I can choose to show my OneDrive in the sidebar. I can choose to show sites I'm following, and I can also choose to show any groups that I'm a member of in Office 365. I can then easily move around different sites. I can copy and paste content from one site to another. From one library to another. So for example, let's go into this environment and say actually I've got some content here, maybe take a couple of items. I can then copy those go into maybe a different location, and maybe I need to reuse that data. So I can simply paste that content into that location, and it will be updated and uploaded and checked in and made available to other users. Now also, by default, Harmony will, when you launch Harmony, it will remember the location that you last used. So it will go to the same library that you were working on previously, for example. But we also have the ability to change the view that you have when you start up to be either your All Sites view, as we saw a moment ago, your favorites, so anything that you mark as a favorite in Harmony, or your update stream. So you can start from any of those points. And let's see where we actually set that. So just to illustrate those, we can see my All Sites view, we can see my Favorites view, and we can see my Update stream. But if we go to the Options and click on the Advanced tab, you'll see that we have a section around Startup. And here's the default behavior to use the last view that we were working in. But we can change that, for example, to say, I'm just interested in starting up with my favorites. And then whenever I start Harmony, I'll automatically get this view so that I can see all of the things that I'm interested in and easily navigate to them. It may be like a number of projects that you're working on, and those are the things that you actually are interested in. You may be aware that also if you navigate to a location, a library or a view a number of times, Harmony will actually suggest favorites to you as well. And just moving on to the last item, and quite fittingly, at the end of the day, what you ideally should be doing is checking in your items so that you can see what I've been working on that day, check them in and make them available to other users. So Harmony actually adds an additional view into your drop-down list of views there, which is My Checked Out Items or My Checked Out Documents, so that I can select that view and I'll see everything that I've currently got checked out, and then I can choose to select them all and check them in to make them available to other users. So this really helps, in the case that, I think a lot of people work on documents and forget to check them in. It may be that I was working on something and now I need to make it available to other users. So this is just a nice, easy way to facilitate sharing content, making people or helping people to work in a very tidy and effective way. So let's take an example of that. Let's go back to where we were working before in one of our libraries. You'll notice we have backwards and forwards buttons at the top of the sidebar. If you just hold down the back button, you'll see all the locations, the views, and the items and things that we've actually been working on over the last 20 minutes or so. So if I actually select maybe this legal library that we were using, you'll see that I have a view now of my checked out documents in that location. Just by selecting that, you can see that I've actually got 3 items that I had checked out, and maybe I made some changes, I saved those, but I didn't check them in. So now I can select multiple items, right-click, check them all in, and make them available to all the rest of my colleagues. Obviously, they then disappear from that view. So I can see I've got a nice clean view at the end of the day of all of my documents that have been checked in and made available to other users. So lastly, we've just got some links here to our online documentation and training videos, which highlight some of the areas that we touched on today, adding sites, uploading content, sharing content, using the update stream, etc. A lot of our customers do take a lot of benefit from those training videos, and the online documentation is very, very detailed and in-depth and kept up to date all the time. Also, if you're using the free edition today and you'd like to try out the Enterprise edition, there is a link on the page here just to request an evaluation of Harmony Enterprise.
So Richard, while people are actually looking at the question, I'm going to let you answer the questions that have come in during the presentation. So the first question I see, somebody asked, can you favorite a document?
An individual document, you can't mark a particular item in an individual item as a favorite, but if you can filter a view that that kind of narrows it down to a particular item and mark that as a favorite, then basically you will be following an individual item.
Great. And the next question, somebody says their filter option is grayed out and they can't use it. Why is that?
Okay. So the filter functionality, the button that we saw, is using the taxonomy service. So basically, it's only available if you have tags or terms, so enterprise keywords or managed metadata enabled in that particular library. And basically, if they aren't enabled, then that button will be grayed out. If they are, then you can utilize that to filter by the taxonomy service.
Okay. And what does the option Save Emails with Unique Name under Options do?
Okay, so that's a good question. So let's take a look at basically what effect that has. Because when we're saving emails, you can see the emails that we captured here have actually got a unique name that we're assigning. So instead of just using the subject, in this case community initiative, it's combining that with the timestamp that the email was sent and the name of the person who sent it. So that, for example, if somebody else tries to upload that particular email into the same location, it will have the same properties and the same timestamp and the same sender. So it's effectively a check for uniqueness of the email item. And obviously you may have different emails that have the same subject, but because they've been sent at a different time or from a different user, they would be considered a different email.
Great, thank you. The next question I see is, does Harmony work with Apple Macs?
So we do have a version of Harmony that is available to use on Apple Mac. Basically, the sidebar that you see here today and that you may have experienced yourself, we are using the Outlook API, which is a space API. But we do also have an app for Office 365 that's basically available across all of the Outlook versions, which includes Outlook for Mac, as well as Outlook on mobile and things as well. And it gives you the ability to save attachments, save emails, and map header information as well.
Thank you. And I think we really have time for one more question. So this is, do you need to have special permissions granted to you in order to change the name of an existing document in SharePoint via Harmony?
Nothing special. Obviously, you need to have right permission, edit permissions on that item. And all the permissions are obviously controlled in SharePoint. So if you don't have the permission to do something, then you'll be prompted to say the reason why you can't do that. Because we're connecting to SharePoint using standard web services, so all of those permissions are basically controlled in SharePoint.
So Richard, thank you for a great presentation and demonstration. If we didn't answer your question, someone will follow up with you shortly. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and of course, thank you, Richard. You'll all receive an email with a link to view the webinar within a couple of days. And we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar.